Boundaries of Blood and Iron. The complete history of U.S. territorial expansion. Act I. The Contested Continent. Scene 1. Introduction. The story of the territorial growth of the United States is more than a sequence of shifting borders on a map. It is an intricate, multi-layered saga of imperial rivalry, democratic experimentation, constitutional crisis, and the systematic displacement of indigenous nations. To understand this modern superpower, we must first look at the continent before it was carved into states. Scene 2. Indigenous civilizations before European arrival. Long before European sails appeared on the Atlantic horizon, North America was a densely populated network of sophisticated civilizations. Complex agricultural societies and expansive trade networks flourished across the continent. In the east, the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois Confederacy, established a participatory democracy bound by the Great Law of Peace, a sophisticated political system that would heavily influence early American democratic thought. In the fertile valleys of the Mississippian culture constructed massive urban earthworks. Their crown jewel, Cahokia, boasted a population of over 15,000 people, larger than contemporary London. Meanwhile, in the arid Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans engineered deep desert apartment complexes and cliff dwellings, taming a harsh and unforgiving environment. Scene 3. The European Imperial Chessboard. By the 16th century, the race to carve up North America pitted multiple European empires against one another. This rivalry established the early territorial boundaries that the United States would later absorb, buy, or conquer. Spain drove deep into the south and west. Motivated by a quest for gold and the spread of Catholicism, Spanish explorers established the first permanent European settlements on the continent: St. Augustine, Florida, in 1565, and Santa Fe, New Mexico, in 1610. Spanish claims eventually stretched across the entire American Southwest, California, and Florida. To the north and interior, France took a different path. Navigating the St. Lawrence River, the Great Lakes, and the Mississippi River Basin, French fur trappers and Jesuit missionaries claimed a vast interior empire known as New France and Louisiana. Their approach relied heavily on trade and fluid alliances with indigenous nations, rather than dense farming settlements. In the mid-1600s, smaller powers carved out brief footholds. The Dutch established New Netherland, centered around the commercial hub of Manhattan, while the Swedes founded New Sweden along the Delaware River. Both prioritized commerce, but their small geographic footprints were swiftly swallowed up by English expansion. English colonization focused on dense, permanent agrarian settlements. Starting with the fragile settlement at Jamestown in 1607 and the Puritan migration to New England, British colonization grew over a century into 13 distinct legal and economic entities. These became the historic 13 colonies, tightly hugging the Atlantic coast. Scene 4. The First Global War. The simmering tensions between the British and French empires eventually culminated in the French and Indian War, lasting from 1754 to 1763. Sparked by a clash in the Ohio River Valley, this conflict ended with the historic Treaty of Paris in 1763. France was completely expelled from the continental mainland. They ceded everything east of the Mississippi to Great Britain and everything west to Spain. To appease Native American allies and prevent further costly conflicts, King George III issued the Proclamation of 1763. This decree banned Anglo-American settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. It was a decision that infuriated land-hungry colonists and planted the early seeds of revolution. Act 2. The Revolutionary Spark and the Statehood Formula. Scene 1. The American Revolution. The War for Independence transformed 13 disparate British colonies into a loose confederation of sovereign states. Winning the war required more than just defeating the British military. It required securing the Treaty of Paris in 1783. This treaty officially recognized the United States and granted the new nation a massive territorial prize, all lands stretching west from the coast to the Mississippi River. This diplomatic victory effectively doubled the size of the original colonies overnight. Scene 2. The Northwest Territory and the Statehood Formula. With immense new lands in hand, the young nation faced a critical dilemma. Should Western territories be ruled as colonies or absorbed as equals? The answer came in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This landmark legislation established the Northwest Territory, covering modern-day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It created a revolutionary, three-stage constitutional mechanism for admitting new states to the Union on an equal footing with the original 13. In the first stage, an unorganized territory was managed by a governor appointed by Congress. In the second stage, once the territory reached 5,000 free adult males, it could elect a territorial legislature and send a non-voting delegate to Congress. In the third stage, once the population reached 60,000 free inhabitants, the territory could draft a state constitution and apply to Congress for official statehood. Crucially, the Northwest Ordinance banned slavery within the territory. This set up the first major geopolitical boundary between free and slave labor, a regional fault line that would eventually tear the nation apart. Act 3. Doubling the Republic. Scene 1. The constitutional process for admitting states. Under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution, known as the Admissions Clause, Congress holds the ultimate authority to admit new states. The typical process involves two key steps. First, Congress passes an enabling act, authorizing a territory to draft a state constitution. Second, following the approval of that constitution and a population vote, Congress passes an act of admission, officially bringing the state into the Union upon the president's signature. Scene 2. The Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, Napoleon Bonaparte suddenly offered to sell the entire French territory of Louisiana for $15 million. President Thomas Jefferson faced an immediate constitutional crisis. The Constitution did not explicitly grant the executive branch the power to purchase foreign land. Jefferson, a strict interpreter of the Constitution, cast his philosophical doubts aside to seize a geopolitical jackpot. The purchase added over 828,000 square miles to the United States, stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. To explore this vast, uncharted domain, Jefferson dispatched the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804 to 1806. Guided by Sacagawea, the Corps of Discovery mapped river systems, cataloged thousands of plant and animal species, and established an American presence all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Scene 3. Securing the Periphery. The War of 1812, fought against Great Britain over maritime rights and Western expansion, solidified American sovereignty over the Midwest. The conflict shattered Native American confederacies trying to protect their homelands and confirmed that the United States was a permanent power on the continent. Shortly after, in 1819, the nation secured the Florida Purchase, also known as the Adams-Onis Treaty. This agreement saw an overextended Spain cede Florida to the United States following unauthorized military incursions by General Andrew Jackson. The treaty also drew a definitive, recognized boundary between U.S. lands and Spanish Mexico. Act 4. From Ocean to Ocean. Scene 1. Manifest Destiny. By the 1830s and 1840s, expansion was driven by the ideology of manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was divinely ordained to expand across the entire North American continent. This era saw the fastest and most aggressive territorial acquisition in American history. Scene 2. The Texas Influx. In the Mexican province of Coahuila y Tejas, Anglo-American settlers revolted against the centralist government of Santa Anna. Following the fall of the Alamo and a decisive victory at the Battle of San Jacinto in 1836, they established the independent Republic of Texas. For 9 years, Congress refused to admit Texas due to fierce political debates over the balance of power between free and slave states. Finally, in late 1845, President John Tyler pushed through a joint resolution of annexation, bringing Texas into the Union as a slave state. Scene 3. The Pacific Coast and War with Mexico. To avoid a third war with Great Britain, President James K. Polk signed the Oregon Treaty in 1846. This agreement extended the U.S. Canadian border along the 49th parallel to the Pacific Ocean, securing the Oregon Country. But peace did not last to the south. A bitter border dispute along the Rio Grande served as the catalyst for the Mexican-American War, lasting from 1846 to 1848. United States forces invaded Mexico, eventually capturing Mexico City. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. For $15 million, Mexico surrendered nearly half its territory in an acquisition known as the Mexican Cession. This land included California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. In 1849, the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill triggered a massive demographic explosion. Within a single year, California bypassed the territorial phase entirely and applied directly for statehood as a free state, once again disrupting the delicate political balance in Congress. To complete the southern border, the United States made the Gadsden Purchase in 1853. The government paid Mexico $10 million for a southern strip of desert land in modern-day Arizona and New Mexico, securing a flat route for a southern transcontinental railroad. Act V. Fracture, Reconstruction, and the Final Frontiers. Scene 1. Civil War and Reconstruction. The fierce political debates over whether newly acquired territories would allow slavery reached a boiling point with the election of Abraham Lincoln, triggering the secession of southern states and the onset of the Civil War. During the conflict, West Virginia broke away from Confederate Virginia to remain loyal to the Union, gaining entry as a state in 1863. Following the Union victory in 1865, Confederate states were not treated as foreign lands, but as rebellious territories requiring reconstruction before their congressional representation could be officially restored. Scene 2. The Indian Wars and the Oklahoma Territory. As white settlers rushed west via the new Transcontinental Railroad, the United States government violently accelerated its policy of Native American displacement. Through hundreds of broken treaties, indigenous nations were systematically stripped of their ancestral lands and forced onto reservations. In the late 1800s, the government dismantled the eastern half of designated Indian Territory, opening the Oklahoma Territory to white settlement through a series of chaotic land runs, culminating in Oklahoma statehood in 1907. Scene 3. Jumping the Ocean. In 1867, Secretary of State William Seward bought Alaska from the Russian Empire for $7.2 million, roughly 2 cents an acre. Initially mocked as Seward's folly, the purchase eventually yielded immense gold, oil, and strategic value. Across the Pacific, American sugar planters, backed by United States Marines, overthrew the indigenous Hawaiian monarchy led by Queen Liliuokalani in 1893. 5 years later, amid the Spanish-American War, the United States officially annexed the islands as a strategic naval outpost. The final statehood push of the contiguous lower 48 states concluded when Arizona and New Mexico entered the Union in 1912. Nearly half a century later, in 1959, Alaska and Hawaii were officially admitted as the 49th and 50th states, completing the modern American flag. The 50 states, chronological roll call. Here is the official record of how every single state entered the Union, moving chronologically from the founding to the modern era. Part 1. The Founding States, 1787 to 1790. The original 13 states joined the Union by ratifying the new United States Constitution. Delaware became the first state on December 7, 1787, originating from the colonial lower counties on Delaware. Pennsylvania became the second state on December 12, 1787, originating from the province of Pennsylvania. New Jersey became the third state on December 18, 1787, originating from the province of New Jersey. Georgia became the fourth state on January 2, 1788, originating from the province of Georgia. Connecticut became the fifth state on January 9, 1788, originating from the colony of Connecticut. Massachusetts became the sixth state on February 6, 1788, originating from the province of Massachusetts Bay. Maryland became the seventh state on April 28, 1788, originating from the province of Maryland. South Carolina became the eighth state on May 23, 1788, originating from the province of South Carolina. New Hampshire became the ninth state on June 21, 1788, originating from the province of New Hampshire, securing the necessary two-thirds majority for the Constitution's adoption. Virginia became the 10th state on June 25, 1788, originating from the colony and dominion of Virginia. New York became the 11th state on July 26, 1788, originating from the province of New York. North Carolina became the 12th state on November 21, 1789, originating from the province of North Carolina. Rhode Island became the 13th state on May 29, 1790, originating from the colony of Rhode Island and Providence plantations. Part 2. Early westward expansion, 1791 to 1859. Following the Revolution, the nation began expanding past its original colonial borders. Vermont became the 14th state on March 4, 1791, after existing as the independent Vermont Republic. Kentucky became the 15th state on June 1, 1792, carved directly from the western lands of Virginia. Tennessee became the 16th state on June 1, 1796, formed from the Southwest Territory. Ohio became the 17th state on March 1, 1803, making it the first state carved from the Northwest Territory. Louisiana became the 18th state on April 30, 1812, formed from the Orleans Territory portion of the Louisiana Purchase. Indiana became the 19th state on December 11, 1816, carved from the Indiana Territory. Mississippi became the 20th state on December 10, 1817, carved from the Mississippi Territory. Illinois became the 21st state on December 3, 1818, carved from the Illinois Territory. Alabama became the 22nd state on December 14, 1819, carved from the Alabama Territory. Maine became the 23rd state on March 15, 1820, after separating from Massachusetts as part of the Missouri Compromise. Missouri became the 24th state on August 10, 1821, formed from the Louisiana Purchase. Arkansas became the 25th state on June 15, 1836, formed from the Arkansas Territory. Michigan became the 26th state on January 26, 1837, carved from the Michigan Territory. Florida became the 27th state on March 3, 1845, formed from the Florida Cession from Spain. Texas became the 28th state on December 29, 1845, following the annexation of the independent Republic of Texas. Iowa became the 29th state on December 28, 1846, carved from the Iowa Territory. Wisconsin became the 30th state on May 29, 1848, carved from the Wisconsin Territory. California became the 31st state on September 9, 1850, admitted directly following the Mexican Cession and the subsequent gold rush. Minnesota became the 32nd state on May 11, 1858, carved from the Minnesota Territory. Oregon became the 33rd state on February 14, 1859, carved from the Oregon Territory. Part 3. The Civil War and Gilded Age, 1861 to 1896. The mid to late 19th century saw states admitted rapidly amidst civil conflict and the Western mining boom. Kansas became the 34th state on January 29, 1861, carved from the Kansas Territory. West Virginia became the 35th state on June 20, 1863, after seceding from Confederate Virginia during the Civil War. Nevada became the 36th state on October 31, 1864, rushed into the Union to secure its silver mines for the Union. Nebraska became the 37th state on March 1, 1867, carved from the Nebraska Territory. Colorado became the 38th state on August 1, 1876, admitted on the nation's centennial. North Dakota became the 39th state on November 2, 1889, divided from the massive Dakota Territory. Montana became the 41st state on November 8, 1889, carved from the Montana Territory. Washington became the 42nd state on November 11, 1889, carved from the Washington Territory. Idaho became the 43rd state on July 3, 1890, carved from the Idaho Territory. Wyoming became the 44th state on July 10, 1890, carved from the Wyoming Territory. Utah became the 45th state on January 4, 1896, admitted after resolving long-standing legal disputes with Congress over regional practices. Part 4. The 20th Century, 1907 to 1959. The final phase of expansion completed the map of the modern United States. Oklahoma became the 46th state on November 16, 1907, formed by merging the Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory. New Mexico became the 47th state on January 6, 1912, formed from the New Mexico Territory. Arizona became the 48th state on February 14, 1912, completing the contiguous lower 48 states from the Arizona Territory. Alaska became the 49th state on January 3, 1959, decades after its purchase from Russia. Hawaii became the 50th state on August 21, 1959, over half a century after its annexation as an overseas territory. Epilogue: the lasting impact on modern America. The legacy of U.S. expansion is built into the very structure of the modern nation. The geometric, grid-based layout of cities and farmland across the Midwest is a direct consequence of the Land Ordinance of 1785. The deep cultural, culinary, and architectural heritage of the Southwest remains profoundly shaped by the centuries of Spanish and Mexican rule that preceded U.S. control. Yet, this rapid growth left deep historical scars. Hundreds of sovereign Native American reservations stand as a lasting testament to centuries of forced displacement and broken federal treaties. Meanwhile, the status of modern overseas U.S. territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands continues to provoke passionate constitutional debates regarding representation, rights, and the true meaning of American identity in the 21st century. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching. Big Meech Black Mafia Family. In the mid-20th century, Detroit, Michigan, was the undisputed industrial heartbeat of the United States. It was a sprawling metropolis built on the promise of the automotive assembly line, where giants like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler erected massive manufacturing hubs. This era drew millions of families to the region, driven by the belief that physical labor could secure stable wages, homeownership, and generational prosperity. Urban and suburban tracts alike flourished around plants operating on 24-hour shifts, turning the Motor City into a global symbol of the American dream. However, this industrial foundation began to crack in the late 1960s, a decline that accelerated dramatically through the 1970s and 1980s. Capital flight, automation, and corporate outsourcing led to the systematic closure of manufacturing plants, leaving hundreds of thousands of blue-collar workers suddenly unemployed. The resulting economic vacuum dismantled municipal tax bases, forcing school systems into steep decline and causing commercial corridors to shutter permanently. For the youth of Detroit, the traditional pathways to upward mobility vanished. Higher education became financially unattainable, and the high-paying manufacturing jobs of their parents' generation no longer existed. This urban deterioration set the stage for alternative, underground economies to emerge, transforming the socio-economic landscape of inner-city America. Part 1. The Rust Belt Crucible and the Genesis of the 50 Boys. The crack cocaine epidemic of the early 1980s permanently altered the social fabric of American inner cities. It created highly lucrative and violent parallel economies in major hubs from Los Angeles to New York and rapidly took root in Detroit. Within this volatile environment, Demetrius Edward Big Meech Flannery was born on June 21, 1968, followed by his younger brother, Terry Lee Southwest T. Flannery, on January 10, 1970. Raised in Southwest Detroit by hardworking, deeply religious parents who struggled to maintain household stability amid the city's economic collapse, the Flannery brothers observed the limits of traditional work in a declining industrial market. The promise of the assembly line was gone, replaced by a hyper-local street market that offered immediate financial returns. By their teenage years in the late 1980s, the brothers had entered the drug trade, selling $50 bags of crack cocaine on the streets of Detroit. This early venture quickly evolved under the mentorship of Edric E.D. Boyd, a street figure who had returned to Detroit from New York, bringing with him systematic retail models. Boyd established the 50 Boys crew, organizing a highly efficient retail street operation alongside the Flannery brothers and their childhood associate Derek D. Meeks. Meeks, who had known the Flannery brothers since the age of 2, had previously managed his own heroin distribution setup before joining forces with Boyd and the Flannerys. Under the 50 Boys banner, Meeks demonstrated the high yields of early crack cocaine markets, generating over $1.2 million in retail sales using a bicycle as his primary transit tool. The 50 Boys quickly dominated the Southwest Detroit market through strict operational discipline. However, their rise triggered a violent turf war with rival independent distributor Leighton Simon, known in dramatized accounts as Lamar Silas. This conflict exposed the high physical risks of retail drug distribution, pushing the Flannery brothers to evaluate the limits of street-level retail operations and setting the stage for a dramatic tactical shift. Part 2. Tactical Transformations, the 9th Street Incident, and the Wholesale Pivot. The physical dangers of retail-level distribution became devastatingly clear in the late 1980s. Terry Flannery was targeted in a shooting on 9th Street in southwest Detroit, directly outside the residence of his children's mother. An unidentified assailant approached the stationary vehicle Terry was occupying and fired a small-caliber handgun through the window. The bullet grazed Terry's eye, causing severe structural trauma. This shooting served as a major turning point for the brothers. Terry's injury forced them to re-evaluate the physical risks of street-level retail operations, where high exposure to local violence yielded relatively small profit margins. The brothers decided to pivot away from retail street operations entirely and transition toward bulk wholesale supply. They pooled their accumulated street profits and the $150,000 malpractice settlement to purchase larger quantities of cocaine, shifting their focus from controlling specific street corners to managing high-volume wholesale distribution networks. This strategic shift minimized their exposure to street-level violence and allowed them to expand their operations beyond Michigan, laying the groundwork for a multi-state distribution network that would redefine modern American organized crime. Part 3. The Bifurcated Empire and the Cartel Connection. By the mid-1990s, the Flannery's wholesale operations had expanded across the Midwest, establishing distribution networks in Missouri, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, California, and Texas. By 2000, the organization formally adopted the name Black Mafia Family, BMF, structuring itself as a highly organized corporate entity with over 500 active members nationwide. The syndicate's success relied on a bifurcated operational structure that divided responsibilities between 2 distinct hubs. The West Coast Procurement Network, managed by Terry Southwest T. Flannery out of Los Angeles, California. Terry was highly analytical and risk-averse, focusing on logistics, price negotiation, and securing direct supply lines from Mexican cartels, specifically the Milenio Cartel and the Beltran-Leyva Cartel. The East Coast Distribution Hub, managed by Demetrius Big Meech Flannery out of Atlanta, Georgia. Demetrius, characterized by his charisma and public ostentation, focused on high-volume distribution, street marketing, and launching BMF Entertainment. This structural shift mirrored other major drug syndicates of the era, such as the Memphis, Tennessee-based empire run by Craig Lil C. Petties. Born on December 11, 1976, in the impoverished Riverside neighborhood, Petties, the half-brother of DJ Paul of the hip-hop group 3 6 Mafia, grew up under similar socio-economic pressures as the Flannery brothers. Despite a low verbal IQ of 77 and dropping out of high school at 16, Petties built a massive wholesale cocaine network in the Mid-South by establishing direct supply lines with the Beltran-Leyva cartel. Both BMF and the Petties organization demonstrated how modern American street syndicates transitioned from localized street gangs into sophisticated, cartel-linked wholesale networks. Part 4. The Stash House System and the Legend of Space Mountain. The day-to-day operations of BMF's Atlanta hub were run through 5 highly secure stash houses. These properties, typically located in upscale suburban neighborhoods to avoid local law enforcement suspicion, served as distribution and financial processing centers. Every 10 days, Transport vehicles arrived at these properties carrying between 100 and 150 kilograms of cocaine hidden in custom-built mechanical compartments, or traps, inside luxury vehicles like Lincoln Navigators and Hummer H2 stretch limousines. To bypass highway drug interdiction, BMF also utilized commercial air freight, receiving bulk shipments at municipal airports before transporting them directly to the stash houses. At these stash houses, paid employees managed inventory and processed incoming cash. Mid-level wholesale buyers placed orders using coded phrases, such as stating their vehicle was ready, indicating that a car with hidden compartments was prepared to receive the shipment. Buyers were directed to rotating stash house locations. Once inside the secured garage, they exchanged cash, packaged in standard $5,000 bundles, for cocaine, which was sold at a wholesale price of approximately $20,000 per kilogram. Stash house workers then processed and packaged the millions of dollars in cash, preparing it for transport back to suppliers in Los Angeles and Mexico. The most famous of these properties was Space Mountain, an ultra-modern mansion located off Mount Perron Road, Perron Place, in Atlanta's affluent Buckhead neighborhood. Space Mountain served as Demetrius Flannery's primary residence and BMF's main high-volume distribution hub. In late 2004, Demetrius received intelligence that the DEA and local police were preparing to raid the mansion. He ordered his crew to evacuate the property, and they successfully moved over 100 kilograms of cocaine out of the home. However, a vehicle parked in the driveway blocked the garage, and because the crew could not find the keys, they were forced to abandon a 2003 Hummer H2 stretch limousine. Federal agents seized the abandoned limousine during the raid, but find no drugs inside during their initial search. The government subsequently sold the vehicle at a federal customs auction, and it spent the next 4 years operating as a commercial rental vehicle for proms and weddings. In August 2008, a cooperating BMF defendant informed prosecutors that the vehicle contained hidden compartments that investigators had missed. Federal agents tracked down the Hummer and discovered mechanical traps beneath the rear seats containing 7 semi-automatic handguns and $875,000 in cash, which had remained completely hidden throughout its civilian use. Space Mountain's operations also intersected directly with the local music industry. During the 2008 federal cocaine conspiracy trial of BMF Lieutenant Fleming "Il" Daniels, high-level stash house operator Ralphie Sims testified that Atlanta rapper Young Jeezy Jenkins was a regular wholesale customer. Sims testified that on multiple occasions in late 2004, high-ranking BMF members Chad J. Bo Brown and Martez Tito Boyrth ordered him to set aside multi-kilogram shipments of cocaine specifically for Jenkins, who personally picked up the drugs from Space Mountain. While Jenkins was never formally charged with a crime in connection to BMF, the testimony highlighted the close, symbiotic ties between the syndicate's distribution network and the rising Southern hip-hop scene. Part 5. BMF Entertainment and the Narco Aesthetic. As the organization's revenues grew, Demetrius Flannery recognized the need for a legitimate business front to explain BMF's massive cash flow and protect it from federal financial investigations. In the early 2000s, he established BMF Entertainment, a music promotion agency, lifestyle brand, and independent record label. The company served as a front to launder drug proceeds by co-mingling cash with legitimate music revenues, while also attempting to transition BMF into a legal enterprise. The label's primary project was launching the career of its sole signed artist, Barima Blue Da Vinci McKnight, who released the album The World Is BMF's. Demetrius ran BMF Entertainment like a major corporate marketing campaign, leasing large billboards across Atlanta that read, "The world is ours." He cultivated high-profile relationships with prominent hip-hop figures, including Sean Combs, Jay-Z, Fabulous, and T.I., successfully integrating BMF into the mainstream music industry. McKnight later testified that Demetrius acted as a protective big brother, intentionally keeping him in the dark about the details of the drug ring to insulate his music career from the illegal operation. Despite these efforts, McKnight was eventually drawn into the enterprise, handling cash and logistics during BMF promotional tours. This public lifestyle was a precursor to the narco aesthetic that later became common among cartel figures, such as Serafin Zambada Ortiz. Born in San Diego, California, to Ismael El Mayo Zambada, a top leader of the Sinaloa cartel, Ortiz regularly posted photos of custom gold-plated firearms, luxury vehicles, and exotic animals on Twitter and Facebook. Just as Ortiz's social media posts helped federal authorities build a conspiracy case against him, BMF's public ostentation, including lavish nightclub parties, a massive fleet of matching luxury vehicles, and prominent billboards, ultimately provided federal investigators with key evidence of a large-scale, highly coordinated criminal conspiracy. Part 6. Internal Rifts and the Shadow of Public Violence. By 2003, BMF's public profile began to cause severe friction between its founders. Terry Flenory, operating from Los Angeles, favored a quiet, low-profile wholesale model focused on operational security and minimizing police attention. He grew increasingly concerned by Demetrius's public lifestyle in Atlanta, which attracted steady attention from local and federal law enforcement. Through Title III wiretaps, DEA investigators recorded Terry complaining to family members that Demetrius's excessive partying, high-profile club appearances, and public behavior were exposing the entire organization to federal scrutiny. This disagreement led to a severe operational schism. By late 2003, the brothers had stopped communicating regularly, effectively splitting the organization into Terry's West Coast procurement network and Demetrius's East Coast distribution and entertainment business. As internal discipline weakened, public violence associated with BMF began to rise, drawing closer attention from law enforcement. This culminated in two major violent incidents in Atlanta. The November 2003 shooting death of Anthony Wolf Jones, a former bodyguard for Sean Combs, and Lamont Riz Gertie outside an Atlanta nightclub, and the subsequent murder of interior designer Racinable Prada Drummond. The Drummond murder highlighted the immense challenges local prosecutors faced when investigating BMF. For years, witnesses refused to testify due to intense fear of retaliation from the syndicate. However, as federal indictments dismantled BMF's leadership, witnesses began cooperating with authorities. In February 2010, BMF Lieutenant Fleming Ill Daniels entered a negotiated guilty plea to voluntary manslaughter in Fulton County Superior Court and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which ran concurrently with his federal drug conspiracy conviction. Part 7. Operation Motor City Mafia and the Decapitation of the Syndicate. The federal investigation that dismantled BMF, codenamed Operation Motor City Mafia, was launched on October 28, 2003, by a multi-agency task force led by the DEA's Special Operations Division. Investigators built their case using a series of coordinated drug seizures and wiretaps that progressively moved up the organization's chain of command. To support these narcotics charges, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, dismantled BMF's money laundering operations. Investigators proved that BMF used drug proceeds to purchase winning 4-digit Michigan State Lottery tickets from the actual winners for cash. BMF then redeemed these tickets directly with the Michigan State Lottery Bureau, receiving clean, state-issued checks totaling over $1 million. These clean funds were used to purchase homes, make mortgage payments, and lease luxury vehicles, creating a paper trail that prosecutors used to secure money laundering convictions. In November 2007, Demetrius and Terry Flenory pleaded guilty to running a continuing criminal enterprise, CCE, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. On September 12, 2008, both brothers were sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. During their incarceration, McKnight and Demetrius Flenory were briefly reunited in 2013 when federal authorities transported all BMF-related prisoners together from Florida to Georgia in an effort to pressure a remaining co-defendant into a plea deal. McKnight later recalled that the brothers spent the transit ride talking and laughing about their past experiences. Although legally prohibited from communicating directly after their release, McKnight noted that they maintain contact and send well wishes through mutual associates. Defendant. Charge/statute. Sentence/penalties. Current custody status, 2026. Demetrius, Big Meech, Flenory. Continuing criminal enterprise, CCE, money laundering. 30 years, CCE, 20 years, laundering. Released from federal custody, January 27, 2026, currently serving 5-year supervised release. Terry Southwest T. Flenory. Continuing criminal enterprise, CCE, money laundering. 30 years, CCE, 20 years, laundering. Pardoned/cleared, December 2024. Fully discharged from home confinement and supervision. Fleming Ill Daniels. Cocaine distribution conspiracy. 20 years federal, 20 years state, manslaughter. Serving concurrent sentences in federal custody. Barima Blue Da Vinci McKnight. Cocaine distribution conspiracy. 5 years federal prison. Completed sentence. Released from federal custody. Part 8. Criminological legacy and the modern media transition. The story of the Black Mafia family transitioned from criminal history into mainstream popular culture with the 2021 premiere of the television series BMF on the Starz network. Executive produced by Curtis 50 Cent Jackson and created by Randy Huggins. The production prioritized authenticity by casting Demetrius Flenory Jr., Lil Meech, to portray his father, Demetrius Big Meech Flenory Sr. Flenory Jr. underwent 2 years of intensive acting lessons in Los Angeles at Jackson's direction before filming began. This casting created a unique dynamic where the son reenacted his father's life, turning BMF's history into a highly successful entertainment franchise. The show, alongside documentaries like the BMF documentary, Blowing Money Fast, has cemented BMF's legacy in American culture. It offers a complex, modern look at brotherhood, capitalism, and the rise and fall of a modern street syndicate born out of the post-industrial economic decline of Detroit. By shifting from street-level retail to cartel-linked wholesale and attempting to legitimize their brand through the music industry, the Flenory brothers charted a unique course in the history of American organized crime, leaving a legacy that continues to be analyzed by criminologists and celebrated in popular culture alike. Part 9. Epilogue. The 2026 Horizon of Freedom and Reconciliation. The trajectory of the Flenory brothers took a series of historic legal turns as their 30-year sentences neared their conclusions, leading to a dramatic transformation of their lives by 2026. Demetrius Big Meech Flenory's path to freedom progressed systematically. After being transferred from FCI Coleman Low in Florida to a residential reentry halfway house in Miami in October 2024, Demetrius was placed under community confinement. This structured transition allowed him to slowly acclimate back into society, participate in mandatory reentry and substance programs, and prepare for a life outside of prison walls. On January 27, 2026, Demetrius Flenory's federal prison sentence officially expired. He was fully released from federal custody, stepping out of the residential reentry system as a free man for the first time in over 20 years. He entered a standard 5-year term of supervised release, guided by his legal team led by Brittany K. Barnett, who celebrated his release as a testament to his personal growth and transformation behind bars. In early 2026, the ultimate culmination of their personal saga occurred when Demetrius and Terry Flenory officially reunited in person. The meeting marked the end of an almost 20-year operational division, personal feud, and legal separation. Visibly older but free, the brothers stood side by side, bringing a sense of closure to the long, turbulent journey that began on the streets of Southwest Detroit in the late 1980s. Today, in 2026, both Flenory brothers are navigating their post-incarceration lives as free citizens. While the underground empire they constructed has long since been dismantled, their names remain heavily etched in the landscape of American hip-hop, television, and criminological study. Their modern transition represents a rare narrative in the history of major American street syndicates, one where the principal architects survived the violence of the streets, outlasted their massive federal prison sentences, and ultimately stepped back into the world to claim their freedom together. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching. The Godfather of Jazz. The untold story of Buddy Bolden and the birth of America's greatest musical revolution. Long before jazz became America's greatest musical gift to the world, before Louis Armstrong dazzled audiences with his trumpet, before Duke Ellington transformed orchestras into masterpieces, and before Harlem became the cultural heartbeat of Black America, there was a man whose sound changed music forever. He left behind no recordings, no written compositions, and almost no photographs. Yet musicians who heard him perform spoke of him with such reverence that his legend outlived them all. His name was Charles "Buddy" Bolden, and many historians regard him as the godfather of jazz. The story of Buddy Bolden is also the story of America itself. It is a story born from slavery and freedom, suffering and celebration, oppression and resilience. It is the story of a city where cultures collided, where music became a language spoken by people who shared little else, and where one man's imagination created an entirely new sound that would eventually influence nearly every genre of modern music. To understand Buddy Bolden, we must first understand the city that created him. By the late 19th century, New Orleans stood apart from every other city in the United States. Founded by the French in 1718, ruled by Spain for decades, and eventually acquired by the United States through the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the city had become one of the most culturally diverse places in North America. French architecture lined its streets, while Spanish traditions remained deeply rooted in everyday life. African customs blended with Caribbean influences. Italian immigrants opened businesses alongside Irish laborers and German craftsmen. Native American traditions continued to shape Louisiana's identity long after European settlement. The city never developed a single culture. Instead, it became a living mosaic of languages, religions, customs, and music. Every neighborhood sounded different. Every celebration had its own rhythm. Military brass bands marched proudly through crowded streets. Catholic churches filled with sacred hymns every Sunday morning. Opera houses introduced wealthy audiences to the great composers of Europe. Dance halls pulsed with lively melodies that invited people to forget their hardships for a few precious hours. Funeral processions transformed grief into celebration, beginning with solemn hymns before erupting into joyful music that honored the life of the departed rather than dwelling solely upon death. Music surrounded every aspect of life. No city in America sounded like New Orleans. But one place more than any other helped shape what would eventually become jazz. Its name was Congo Square. During the 18th and 19th centuries, thousands of enslaved Africans were brought to Louisiana through the transatlantic slave trade. Throughout much of the South, enslaved people were forbidden from practicing many aspects of their culture. Yet New Orleans became an unusual exception. On Sundays, enslaved Africans were permitted to gather in an open public space known as Congo Square. There they danced. They sang. They played handmade drums. They performed ceremonies remembered from their homelands. Observers described enormous circles of dancers moving in perfect rhythm, while drummers created layered beats unlike anything heard in European music. Voices answered one another through powerful call and response songs that echoed across the square. These gatherings were far more than entertainment. They were acts of cultural survival. Generations passed those rhythms from parent to child. Even after slavery ended, the music remained. The heartbeat of Africa continued beating in New Orleans. At the same time, another musical influence was growing throughout the city. Following the Civil War, thousands of military instruments became available as army bands disbanded. Trumpets, cornets, trombones, tubas, clarinets, and drums found their way into pawn shops, making instruments affordable for working-class musicians. Brass bands appeared throughout New Orleans, performing at political rallies, neighborhood festivals, weddings, funerals, and public celebrations. Young musicians learned by listening rather than reading sheet music. Technique mattered, but expression mattered even more. Among those young musicians was Charles Joseph Bolden. Born on September 6, 1877, Buddy Bolden entered a city overflowing with musical possibility. His family belonged to New Orleans working class, where hard work was necessary simply to survive. Like many young black men of his generation, Bolden learned a skilled trade and became a barber. It was respectable work that provided steady income, but it was never his true calling. His heart belonged to music. Whenever work ended, Bolden reached for his cornet. Unlike many musicians who carefully imitated those who came before them, Bolden possessed a restless imagination. He constantly experimented with melodies, rhythms, and phrasing. Friends noticed that no two performances ever sounded exactly alike. He refused to play music the same way twice. That single decision would eventually transform American music forever. At the time, musicians were generally expected to perform written arrangements faithfully. Precision mattered. Accuracy mattered. Repeating the composer's intentions mattered. Buddy Bolden believed something entirely different. He believed music should breathe. He believed musicians should speak through their instruments the way ordinary people spoke through conversation. If a melody could be improved, change it. If emotion demanded a different note, play it. If inspiration struck in the middle of a performance, follow it. Today, the world knows this approach as improvisation. During the 1890s, it was revolutionary. Bolden's performances quickly became legendary throughout New Orleans. Crowds packed dance halls wherever his band appeared. Musicians traveled across the city simply to study his playing. According to countless eyewitness accounts, Bolden's cornet produced an astonishing volume. Long before microphones or electronic amplification existed, listeners claimed they could hear his instrument from blocks away. But it was not merely loud. It was expressive. Bolden bent notes between pitches, creating emotional colors rarely heard in formal European music. He emphasized rhythm over perfection. Instead of forcing every musician to follow rigid arrangements, he encouraged each performer to contribute something unique. His band became a conversation. Every performance became alive. Every audience experienced something different. Word spread rapidly throughout New Orleans. Buddy Bolden became the musician everyone wanted to hear. Ironically, the world never would. The recording industry was still in its infancy during Bolden's rise to fame. Commercial recording technology existed, but it had not yet captured the vibrant musical culture of New Orleans. By the time record companies began documenting early jazz musicians, Buddy Bolden's performing career had already come to an end. Everything historians know about his music comes from eyewitness testimony. Those eyewitnesses agreed on one remarkable point. No one had ever sounded like Buddy Bolden before. Musicians who later became legends themselves openly credited Bolden's influence. Among them was Joe King Oliver, one of New Orleans' greatest cornet players. Oliver absorbed Bolden's revolutionary style before eventually mentoring a gifted young trumpeter named Louis Armstrong. Armstrong would carry New Orleans jazz to Chicago. From Chicago, jazz spread to New York. From New York, it conquered the world. Every major chapter in jazz history traces its ancestry back to ideas first introduced by Buddy Bolden. Swing, big band, bebop, cool jazz, hard bop, modal jazz, jazz fusion. Each generation expanded upon the musical freedom Bolden pioneered decades earlier. Yet, just as his influence reached its greatest heights inside New Orleans, tragedy arrived without warning. Around 1906, friends and fellow musicians noticed alarming changes in Bolden's behavior. Once energetic and charismatic, he became increasingly unpredictable. He struggled with severe mental illness during an era when medical understanding remained extremely limited. In 1907, at only 29 years old, Buddy Bolden was committed to the Louisiana State Insane Asylum in Jackson, Mississippi. His career ended overnight. The music that had captivated New Orleans fell silent. He would never perform professionally again. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching. The godfather of hip-hop. How DJ Kool Herc created a global cultural revolution. When historians discuss the greatest musical revolutions in human history, they often mention the birth of jazz in New Orleans, the emergence of blues in Mississippi, the explosion of rock and roll during the 1950s, or the British invasion led by the Beatles during the 1960s. Yet few cultural movements have spread across the globe as rapidly or become as influential as hip-hop. Today, hip-hop is far more than a style of music. It is a global culture. It influences fashion, language, business, sports, technology, politics, advertising, education, and entertainment on every continent. Hip-hop generates hundreds of billions of dollars worldwide. Its artists have become billionaires. Its music dominates streaming services. Its dance styles appear in the Olympics. Its influence reaches nearly every country on Earth. But every worldwide movement begins somewhere. Hip-hop did not begin inside a $1 million recording studio. It did not begin with a major record company. It did not begin in Hollywood. It began inside the recreation room of an apartment building in one of New York City's poorest neighborhoods. And at the center of that revolution stood one man. His name was Clive Campbell. History knows him as DJ Kool Herc. He is widely recognized as the godfather of hip-hop. His story begins thousands of miles away from New York City. It begins in Kingston, Jamaica. DJ Kool Herc was born Clive Campbell on April 16, 1955, in Kingston, Jamaica. During the 1950s, Jamaica was undergoing enormous social and political change. Although still under British colonial rule until gaining independence on August 6, 1962, Jamaica possessed one of the Caribbean's richest musical cultures. Music was everywhere. Churches, street corners, dance halls, markets, family gatherings. Entire neighborhoods built enormous outdoor sound systems capable of entertaining thousands of people. Unlike the United States, where live bands often performed at dances, Jamaican communities developed a unique tradition. Instead of musicians playing instruments live, powerful mobile sound systems blasted records through giant handmade speakers, while DJs selected music and toasters spoke rhythmically over instrumental sections. Competition between sound systems became fierce. Operators constantly searched for louder speakers, stronger amplifiers, and rare records unavailable to competitors. Entire reputations depended upon controlling the dance floor. These outdoor dances became known simply as sound system parties. Young Clive Campbell watched this culture develop around him. Although he could not have known at the time, these childhood experiences would eventually reshape popular music forever. In 1967, at 12 years old, Clive immigrated with his family to the Bronx, New York City. The Bronx he entered was dramatically different from the Jamaica he left behind. America during the late 1960s was experiencing profound change. The civil rights movement challenged segregation. The Vietnam War divided the nation. Cities experienced economic decline. Factories closed. Manufacturing jobs disappeared. Many middle-class families moved into surrounding suburbs. Entire neighborhoods struggled with unemployment and poverty. Few places experienced these challenges more severely than the South Bronx. Construction of the Cross Bronx Expressway during the 1950s and 1960s displaced thousands of residents and accelerated neighborhood decline. Landlords abandoned buildings. Arson increased. Crime rose sharply. By the early 1970s, national newspapers frequently portrayed the Bronx as one of America's most troubled urban communities. Young people lacking expensive entertainment created their own culture. Graffiti artists transformed subway cars into moving works of art. Street dancers practiced on sidewalks. Basketball courts became gathering places. Neighborhood parks hosted community parties. Standing approximately 6 feet 4 inches tall and possessing tremendous physical strength, Clive Campbell quickly attracted attention. Friends nicknamed him Hercules. Eventually, the nickname was shortened. He became simply Herc. When he began DJing neighborhood parties, another word was added, the Kool Herc. Inspired by the enormous Jamaican sound systems of his childhood, Herc began building his own. He invested heavily in turntables, amplifiers, and speakers. His equipment produced significantly louder sound than most neighborhood DJs. People came not simply to hear music, they came to experience it. The bass shook entire buildings. The speakers became legendary. Soon Herc's parties became some of the most popular events in the Bronx. Everything changed forever on August 11th, 1973. Herc's younger sister, Cindy Campbell, wanted to raise money for school clothes before returning to classes at Alfred E. Smith High School. She organized a back-to-school jam inside the recreation room at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, an apartment building in the West Bronx. Admission cost 25 cents for girls, 50 cents for boys. No one attending realized they were participating in one of the most important events in modern music history. As Herc played records that evening, he carefully watched the dancers. He noticed something remarkable. Every time songs reached the instrumental break, the short section where vocals disappeared and only drums, bass, guitar, or percussion remained, the crowd exploded with excitement. Dancers waited for those moments. The energy intensified. People cheered. Bodies filled the dance floor. Unfortunately, those breaks usually lasted only a few seconds. Most DJs simply allowed the record to continue. Herc refused. Using 2 turntables and 2 copies of the same record, he switched back and forth between each record, extending the break repeatedly. When one record approached the end of its break, he instantly switched to the second copy, then back again. The audience suddenly experienced something completely new. Instead of 10 seconds, the break continued for minutes. The dancers never stopped moving. The excitement never faded. This innovation became known as the merry-go-round. Although simple in concept, it fundamentally changed modern music. The extended break became the foundation upon which hip-hop was built. The dancers who loved these instrumental sections became known as break boys and break girls. Eventually, those names were shortened. B-boys, B-girls. Their athletic performances evolved into what the world now knows as breakdancing. More than 50 years later, breaking has become an Olympic sport. Its origins trace directly to DJ Kool Herc's Bronx parties. Herc's innovation inspired countless other young DJs. Among those who studied his techniques were Grandmaster Flash, born Joseph Sadler on January 1st, 1958 in Bridgetown, Barbados, and Africa Bambaataa, born Kevin Donovan on April 17, 1957 in the Bronx. Grandmaster Flash expanded Herc's ideas by developing faster cueing techniques, precise record manipulation, and innovative mixing methods. Africa Bambaataa transformed hip-hop from neighborhood entertainment into a broader cultural movement, eventually founding the Universal Zulu Nation during the early 1970s to promote peace, unity, and creativity through hip-hop culture. Meanwhile, Herc began inviting friends to speak over the music. One of the earliest and most important was Coke La Rock, widely recognized as hip-hop's first MC. Rather than singing, Coke La Rock energized audiences with rhythmic phrases, crowd participation, and improvised rhymes. These performances gradually evolved into rap music. What began as announcements between records eventually became an entirely new musical art form. By the late 1970s, independent record labels recognized hip-hop's commercial potential. In September 1979, the Sugar Hill Gang released Rapper's Delight. The song became the first commercially successful rap record, introducing millions of listeners worldwide to hip-hop culture. Although DJ Kool Herc did not appear on the record, its existence depended entirely upon a musical foundation he created 6 years earlier. Without the breakbeat, without Bronx block parties, without Herc's innovations, commercial rap might never have existed. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching. Fred Trump, the man who built a real estate empire before the Trump name became famous. When people hear the name Trump, they often think of towering skyscrapers, luxury hotels, television, politics, and one of the most recognizable families in America. Yet, decades before the Trump name appeared on the skyline of Manhattan or entered the White House, another Trump quietly built one of the largest private real estate empires in New York City. His name was Fred Trump. While his son Donald would become an international celebrity, Fred spent nearly his entire life avoiding the spotlight, preferring construction sites to television cameras and balance sheets to newspaper headlines. Fred Trump's life is a uniquely American story of immigration, hard work, ambition, discipline, controversy, and extraordinary wealth. From a fatherless 12-year-old learning carpentry in Queens to a billionaire real estate patriarch responsible for tens of thousands of homes, Fred Trump helped shape New York City while laying the financial foundation for one of America's most famous business families. Growing up in an immigrant family, Fred Trump was born Frederick Christ Trump on October 11, 1905, in the Bronx, New York City. His parents were German immigrants whose lives reflected the hopes of millions who came to America seeking opportunity. His father, Frederick Trump, originally named Friedrich Trump, immigrated from the German village of Karlstadt in the late 19th century. After arriving in the United States, he worked as a barber before heading west during the Klondike Gold Rush. Instead of searching for gold himself, he built restaurants and boarding houses that served miners, eventually earning enough money to return to New York and invest in real estate. Fred's mother, Elizabeth Christ Trump, was equally important to the family's success. Intelligent, determined, and business-minded, she helped preserve the family's investments after tragedy struck and became one of the greatest influences on Fred's life. The Trump household valued discipline, thrift, and hard work. Every dollar had a purpose, and every family member was expected to contribute. Tragedy changes everything. In 1918, the worldwide influenza pandemic claimed the life of Fred's father. Fred was only 12 years old. Rather than selling the family's business, Elizabeth Trump chose to continue operating it. She involved Fred in nearly every aspect of property management, exposing him to repairs, maintenance, construction planning, and tenant relations at an early age. This experience became an education no classroom could provide, learning the construction trades. As a teenager, Fred decided he wanted to understand every part of the construction business. He learned carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, brick masonry, blueprint reading, cost estimation, property maintenance. Instead of supervising from a distance, he worked alongside laborers, gaining first-hand knowledge that later allowed him to manage large construction projects with confidence. His first building project. In the early 1920s, New York City suburbs were expanding rapidly. Using resources connected to the family business, Fred built his first house while still a young man. He completed much of the labor himself and sold the property for a profit. Rather than spending the money, he reinvested every dollar into another project. This cycle of building, selling, and reinvesting became the foundation of his lifelong business strategy. Fred eventually took a leading role in the family company, known as E. Trump and Son. Unlike many developers who pursued luxury projects, Fred focused on affordable housing for working and middle-class families. His developments emphasized strong construction, reasonable rents, reliable neighborhoods, long-term rental income. This practical approach allowed the business to grow steadily for decades. Surviving the Great Depression. The Great Depression devastated the American economy, forcing many construction companies into bankruptcy. Fred survived because he managed money conservatively. He controlled costs, limited debt, and concentrated on housing that remained in demand even during difficult economic times. By the time the economy recovered, many competitors had disappeared, leaving new opportunities for expansion. World War II. During World War II, housing demand increased around military bases and shipyards. Fred secured government-supported contracts to construct housing for defense workers and military personnel. These projects expanded his company's experience, workforce, and financial strength. The post-war housing boom. After the war, millions of returning veterans needed homes. Fred quickly responded by constructing apartment complexes and residential communities throughout Queens and Brooklyn. Over several decades, his company built or managed more than 27,000 apartments and houses, making him one of New York City's largest residential developers. His buildings provided homes for tens of thousands of families and remain part of New York's housing landscape today. His business philosophy. Fred believed lasting wealth came through patience and discipline. His principles included: never waste money, watch every expense, inspect construction personally, keep debt under control, build for long-term income, focus on quality. Employees frequently noted his extraordinary attention to detail. He could identify construction flaws that others overlooked and expected high standard from everyone working on his projects. Marriage and family. In 1936, Fred married Mary Ann MacLeod, a Scottish immigrant. Together, they had 5 children: Mary Ann Trump Barry, Fred Trump Jr., Elizabeth Trump Grau, Donald Trump, Robert Trump. Although the family became wealthy, Fred maintained a reputation for discipline and expected his children to understand the value of work. Teaching Donald Trump. Donald Trump spent much of his youth accompanying his father to construction sites, apartment buildings, and business meetings. Fred taught him lessons about real estate financing, property management, cash flow, construction, negotiation, long-term investing. These experiences strongly influenced Donald's later business career. Controversies. Fred Trump's career was also marked by controversy. Congressional investigators examined profits from certain government-backed housing projects during the 1950s. In 1973, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a civil lawsuit alleging housing discrimination by the Trump Organization. The company denied intentionally discriminating, and the case concluded with a settlement that included changes to rental practices without an admission of liability. These events remain important parts of his historical legacy. Financial success. Fred accumulated enormous wealth through disciplined investing, careful construction management, rental income, and long-term ownership of real estate. Rather than relying on risky speculation, he built his fortune gradually over many decades. His business became one of the largest privately owned residential real estate companies in New York. Philanthropy. Throughout his life, Fred supported hospitals, medical organizations, educational institutions, veterans groups, and charitable causes. Unlike many wealthy business leaders, he generally donated quietly without seeking public recognition. Final years. During the 1990s, Fred's health declined as he developed Alzheimer's disease. He gradually stepped away from business while Donald assumed greater leadership within the company. Fred Trump died on June 25, 1999, at the age of 93. Legacy. Fred Trump left behind more than buildings. He left behind a philosophy centered on discipline, hard work, careful investing, and long-term planning. Supporters remember him as one of New York's most successful residential developers whose work provided housing for thousands of families. Critics argue that his legacy also includes the controversies surrounding government investigations and discrimination allegations. Regardless of perspective, Fred Trump transformed a modest family business into one of the most successful private real estate companies in New York City. The financial foundation he built enabled future generations of the Trump family to pursue larger ambitions in business, entertainment, and politics, ensuring that the Trump name would become recognized around the world. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching. The Man Who Disappeared. The true story of Frank Matthews, America's most elusive drug kingpin. Every generation produces criminals whose names become legendary. Al Capone ruled Chicago during Prohibition. Lucky Luciano helped reshape organized crime in America. Pablo Escobar built a cocaine empire that challenged the Colombian government. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman escaped from maximum security prisons. Frank Lucas became famous for claiming to bypass the mafia's heroin supply chain. But among the most mysterious figures in American criminal history stands a man whose story remains unfinished. A man who built an empire worth millions of dollars. A man who became one of the Drug Enforcement Administration's highest priority targets. A man who allegedly disappeared with an estimated $20 million in cash. A man who has never been found. His name was Frank Larry Matthews. Unlike nearly every major organized crime figure of the 20th century, Frank Matthews was never convicted on the charges that made him famous. He was never sentenced to decades in federal prison. He was never assassinated in a public shooting. He was never extradited from another country. He was never captured after years on the run. Instead, he simply vanished. More than 50 years have passed since his disappearance. The mystery continues to fascinate historians, retired investigators, journalists, and students of organized crime. What made Frank Matthews different was not simply the amount of money investigators believed he earned. It was the way he allegedly built his organization. During an era when many heroin traffickers depended upon traditional mafia-controlled distribution networks, federal investigators believed Matthews had begun developing his own independent supply relationships. If true, this represented a major shift in the American narcotics trade and threatened existing criminal organizations. Whether every allegation against him can be proven is still debated. But one fact is beyond dispute. Frank Matthews became one of the most wanted fugitives in America. To understand how he reached that point, we must begin at the beginning. Frank Larry Matthews was born on February 13, 1944, in Durham, North Carolina. America was in the middle of World War II. Franklin D. Roosevelt was President of the United States. Factories operated around the clock producing tanks, aircraft, ammunition, and military equipment. The nation was united by war abroad, while still divided by racial segregation at home. Durham occupied a unique place in American history. For decades, it had been known for one of the nation's most successful black business districts along Parrish Street, often called Black Wall Street. African-American entrepreneurs established banks, insurance companies, newspapers, and businesses despite the restrictions imposed by Jim Crow laws. Yet opportunity remained unequal. Schools were segregated. Employment opportunities were limited. Political power was restricted. Many families lived in poverty despite working long hours. It was into this world that Frank Matthews was born. Compared with famous political leaders or entertainers, relatively little verified information exists about Matthews' childhood. Unlike many historical figures, he did not leave behind memoirs, diaries, or extensive interviews describing his early life. Most of what historians know about him comes from later law enforcement investigations, newspaper reports, and court records after he had already become a major narcotic suspect. At some point during his youth, Matthews left North Carolina. Like millions of African Americans during the Great Migration, he headed north in search of greater opportunity. His destination was New York City. By the 1960s, New York had become one of the largest and most influential cities in the world. It was a financial capital, a cultural center, a transportation hub. It was also becoming one of the largest narcotics markets in the United States. Heroin addiction increased dramatically during the 1960s. Demand expanded throughout New York and many other major American cities. Whenever enormous demand exists, someone attempts to control the supply. According to federal investigators, Frank Matthews recognized this opportunity earlier than many of his competitors. Unlike low-level street dealers focused on daily sales, Matthews allegedly concentrated on wholesale distribution. Investigators believed he understood that the greatest profits belonged to those who controlled supply rather than retail sales. Federal authorities later alleged that Matthews built relationships extending far beyond New York. His organization reportedly distributed heroin into numerous cities, including Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, and other major metropolitan areas. The exact size of his operation remains debated. Some estimates were based upon intelligence reports. Others came from confidential informants. Still others emerged during criminal investigations. Because much of the business operated illegally and secretly, historians cannot determine with certainty how much heroin Matthews actually controlled. Nevertheless, investigators consistently described him as one of the nation's largest independent traffickers during the early 1970s. One characteristic separated Matthews from many organized crime figures. He reportedly preferred organization over unnecessary violence. While violence certainly surrounded the heroin trade, Matthews became known among investigators for his business-minded approach. He allegedly emphasized logistics, transportation, pricing, and supply relationships. Federal authorities claimed this approach allowed his organization to expand rapidly. As his influence increased, so did government attention. The early 1970s marked a turning point in America's fight against narcotics trafficking. In July 1973, the United States formally created the Drug Enforcement Administration by combining several federal agencies responsible for drug enforcement. Even before the DEA officially opened its doors, investigators had already identified Matthews as one of their highest priority targets. Federal agents spent months collecting evidence. They interviewed informants, conducted surveillance, followed financial leads, reviewed telephone records, built conspiracy cases. Eventually, prosecutors believed they possessed enough evidence to move forward. Matthews was arrested on federal narcotics charges. He was released on bond while awaiting trial. Authorities expected him to appear in court. He never did. On June 26, 1973, Frank Matthews disappeared. According to investigators, approximately $20 million also vanished. The money has never been recovered. Matthews has never been located. The DEA launched one of the largest fugitive investigations in its history. The FBI joined the search. The United States Marshals Service participated. Tips arrived from around the world. Some claim Matthews escaped to Africa. Others suggested Europe, South America, the Caribbean. Some believed he remained inside the United States under a false identity. Others argued he had been murdered by rivals over the missing money. Despite decades of investigation, none of these theories has been conclusively proven. No verified photograph has surfaced. No confirmed financial records. No authenticated death certificate. No identified burial site. No arrest. No verified witness capable of solving the mystery. Today, historians distinguish carefully between documented facts and speculation. The documented facts are clear. Frank Matthews existed. He became the subject of major federal narcotics investigations. He disappeared before standing trial. He has never been found. His story remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal history. More than 50 years later, the question remains exactly as investigators first asked it in 1973. Did Frank Matthews successfully escape? Was he murdered? Did he create an entirely new identity somewhere else in the world? Or did the answers disappear with him forever? Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Frank Matthews is not how he built his alleged empire. It is how one of the most wanted men in America seemingly disappeared without leaving behind a single verifiable clue. History remembers many criminals for how they were captured. Frank Matthews is remembered because he never was. If you enjoyed this content, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching. The janitor who died a multi-millionaire. The remarkable true story of Ronald James Redd. Every generation has a handful of stories so extraordinary that they almost sound fictional. A poor farm boy who becomes a millionaire. A homeless veteran who becomes a successful entrepreneur. Yet among all of America's wealth-building stories, perhaps none is more remarkable than the life of Ronald James Redd. He never became a doctor. He never became a lawyer. He never earned an MBA. He never managed a Fortune 500 company. He never rang the opening bell on Wall Street. He never appeared on Forbes' list of the richest Americans. Most people never knew his name while he was alive. For nearly his entire adult life, Ronald Redd worked jobs that millions of Americans perform every single day. He pumped gasoline. He repaired automobiles. Later, he swept floors, emptied trash cans, polished windows, and cleaned restrooms as a part-time janitor. To everyone around him, Ronald appeared to be exactly what he was, a hard-working, humble man who earned an ordinary paycheck. Nothing more, or so everyone believed. Then came June 2014. Ronald James Redd died quietly in Brattleboro, Vermont, at the age of 92. His funeral attracted little national attention. There were no television cameras, no celebrities, no financial analysts, no crowds of reporters, just friends, neighbors, and members of a small Vermont community saying goodbye to a man they believed had lived a simple life. Then his estate was opened. Lawyers began examining his financial records, investment accounts, stock certificates, dividend statements. What they discovered stunned everyone. The quiet janitor, the retired gas station attendant, the man who drove old cars, the man who wore inexpensive flannel shirts, the man who clipped grocery coupons, had quietly accumulated nearly $8 million. Almost overnight, Ronald James Reed became one of the most talked about investors in America. Financial magazines analyzed his portfolio. Television programs discussed his investing habits. Economists pointed to his life as proof that ordinary people could build extraordinary wealth. His story spread across newspapers around the world. It was how he had done it. There was no secret formula. No cryptocurrency. No day trading. No lottery ticket. No inheritance. No lucky break. No Silicon Valley startup. No best-selling book. No professional investment career. Just decades of discipline. Quiet discipline. The kind that nobody notices until it has completely transformed a person's life. To understand Ronald James Reed's extraordinary journey, we must travel back nearly 100 years to a very different America. Ronald James Reed was born on October 23, 1921, in the tiny farming community of Dummerston, Vermont. Today, Dummerston remains a peaceful New England town known for rolling hills, forests, covered bridges, dairy farms, and quiet country roads. In 1921, it was even smaller. Life moved at a slower pace. Families depended upon agriculture. Neighbors knew one another by name. Children were expected to contribute to household work almost as soon as they were old enough to carry a bucket or swing an axe. Electricity had not yet reached every rural home. Automobiles were becoming more common, but horses still played an important role on many farms. Indoor plumbing was not universal. Modern conveniences that people now consider ordinary simply did not exist for many rural families. Ronald entered this world during a period of dramatic change. Only 3 years earlier, World War I had ended. The United States was experiencing rapid industrial growth. Cities were expanding. Factories were producing automobiles in record numbers. Yet life in rural Vermont remained largely unchanged. Hard work still determined whether a family succeeded. Ronald's parents were poor farmers. Their wealth did not come from bank accounts. It came from livestock, fields, harvests, firewood, tools. Every season demanded different labor. Spring meant planting. Summer meant tending crops. Autumn meant harvesting. Winter meant surviving. Children worked alongside adults because every pair of hands mattered. Ronald learned responsibility long before he understood money. He learned that food did not appear magically on a table. Someone had to plant it, water it, harvest it, preserve it, prepare it. Those lessons quietly shaped the habits that would define the rest of his life. Waste was unacceptable. If a fence broke, you repaired it. If boots wore out, you patched them. If clothing tore, you sewed it. Nothing useful was thrown away simply because something newer existed. Decades later, neighbors would remember Ronald living exactly the same way. Not because he was poor, but because those habits had become part of who he was. Then came one of the greatest economic disasters in American history. In October 1929, when Ronald was only 8 years old, the United States stock market collapsed. Within months, businesses failed. Banks closed. Millions of Americans lost their jobs. Families that had once considered themselves financially secure suddenly found themselves struggling to survive. The Great Depression had begun. For wealthy Americans, the Depression represented financial loss. For poor farming families like Ronald's, it reinforced lessons they already understood. Every dollar mattered. Debt could become dangerous. Financial security could disappear almost overnight. Many historians believe childhood experiences during the Great Depression permanently shaped the financial habits of an entire generation. People who lived through those years often became lifelong savers. They avoided unnecessary debt. They valued stability over excitement. They prepared for difficult times because they had already lived through them. Ronald James Reed would become one of the greatest examples of that generation's financial mindset. As he grew older, education became increasingly important. Attending Brattleboro High School required determination. Every day, Ronald walked or hitchhiked approximately 4 miles each way. Then, snow, cold, heat, it didn't matter. He went anyway. There were easier reasons to quit. Many young people from farming families left school early to help support their households. Education often appeared less practical than immediate work. But Ronald continued, eventually becoming the first member of his family to graduate from high school. It was a quiet achievement. There were no newspaper headlines, no scholarships, no national recognition. Yet it represented something larger. Discipline. Persistence. The willingness to continue doing difficult things long after excitement had disappeared. Those same qualities would later make him one of America's most extraordinary investors. Few people recognized it at the time. Mansa Musa, the emperor who may have been the richest person in human history. His name was Mansa Musa. The 14th century ruler of the Mali Empire is widely regarded by historians as one of the wealthiest people who has ever lived. His fortune was so immense that contemporary writers struggled to describe it accurately. Even today, economists and historians admit that assigning a modern dollar value to his wealth is nearly impossible. As historian Rudolph Butch, of the University of California, explained to the BBC, contemporary accounts of Musa's wealth are so breathless that it's almost impossible to get a sense of just how wealthy and powerful he truly was. Those words capture the extraordinary challenge of understanding Mansa Musa. He was not simply rich. He ruled an empire whose natural resources, strategic trade routes, political organization, and economic influence made it one of the greatest civilizations of the medieval world. To understand Mansa Musa, we must first understand the empire he inherited. Long before European colonial powers reached West Africa, the Mali Empire had become one of the world's largest and most prosperous states. Founded during the 13th century after the legendary rise of Sundiata Keita, Mali expanded across an enormous territory that included much of present-day Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, Niger, the Gambia, and parts of Ivory Coast. Stretching thousands of miles across West Africa, the empire occupied one of the most strategically valuable locations on Earth. It controlled the southern edge of the Sahara Desert. It possessed fertile farmland. It dominated major caravan routes. Most importantly, it controlled some of the richest gold-producing regions in the world. During the Middle Ages, gold functioned as the foundation of international commerce. Kings used it to mint coins. Merchants relied upon it for trade. Governments stored it as wealth. Empires fought to obtain it. Much of the gold circulating throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East originated from West Africa, and the Mali Empire stood at the center of that production. The empire also controlled valuable salt mines. Although salt may seem ordinary today, it was among the most valuable commodities of the medieval world. Before refrigeration, salt preserved food, protected livestock, and sustained armies during long campaigns. Mali controlled both. This combination transformed the empire into an economic superpower. When Mansa Musa became emperor around 1312, he inherited one of history's greatest concentrations of natural wealth. Yet he did not simply preserve the empire. He expanded it. Under his leadership, Mali extended its authority over additional territories, strengthened trade networks, increased political stability, and enhanced its international reputation. His reign represented the height of Mali's political and economic power. The event that made Mansa Musa famous throughout the world occurred in 1324. That year, he began the Islamic pilgrimage known as the Hajj, traveling from West Africa to the holy city of Mecca. The journey covered nearly 4,000 miles. It crossed deserts, kingdoms, mountain passes, and major cities throughout North Africa and the Middle East. Few rulers had ever attempted such an expedition. Even fewer did so with an entourage unlike anything the medieval world had witnessed. Historical accounts describe a caravan consisting of tens of thousands of people. The procession reportedly included soldiers, servants, government officials, scholars, merchants, attendants, and enslaved workers. Hundreds of camels carried enormous quantities of gold. Contemporary Arab historians recorded that each camel transported heavy loads of gold dust and bullion. Along the route, Musa Musa distributed generous gifts to the poor. He rewarded religious leaders. He financed construction projects. He purchased luxury goods. He donated gold to cities that welcomed his caravan. His generosity became legendary. Nowhere did it have a greater impact than Cairo. When Musa Musa arrived in Egypt, he spent and distributed so much gold that the local economy experienced a significant increase in the gold supply. Medieval historians, including Al-Makrizi, later wrote that the sudden abundance of gold reduced its value and contributed to inflation that lasted for years. Modern economists generally agree that introducing an unusually large quantity of precious metal into a regional economy can reduce its purchasing power. Although scholars debate the exact duration and severity of the inflation, there is broad agreement that Musa Musa's spending produced measurable economic consequences. Few individuals in history have possessed enough wealth to influence an entire regional economy simply by traveling through it. The pilgrimage also transformed Mali's international reputation. Before Musa Musa's journey, many people beyond Africa possessed little knowledge of his empire. Afterward, maps produced in Europe frequently depicted the emperor seated upon a throne while holding a large gold nugget in his hand. One of the most famous examples appears in the Catalan Atlas of 1375, where Musa Musa is portrayed as the powerful ruler of a land overflowing with gold. These images encouraged merchants, scholars, diplomats, and eventually European explorers to learn more about West Africa. His pilgrimage effectively introduced Mali to much of the known world. Yet Musa Musa's greatest achievement was not simply displaying wealth. It was investing it. Unlike rulers who devoted fortunes exclusively to warfare or personal luxury, Musa Musa financed education, architecture, religion, and scholarship. He commissioned mosques throughout his empire. He supported Islamic learning. He welcomed scholars from North Africa and the Middle East. He invested heavily in Timbuktu. Today, Timbuktu is often remembered as a remote desert city. During Musa Musa's reign, however, it became one of the world's greatest intellectual centers. Students traveled from across Africa and the Islamic world to study there. Scholars debated mathematics. Astronomers observed the heavens. Physicians advanced medical knowledge. Jurists interpreted law. Writers copied manuscripts by hand. Teachers instructed thousands of students. The Sankor Madrasa became internationally respected as a center of higher learning. At its height, Timbuktu reportedly housed one of the largest collections of handwritten manuscripts anywhere in the world. Many covered astronomy. Others examined medicine. Some explored mathematics. Others preserved theology, philosophy, law, poetry, geography, and history. These manuscripts demonstrated that medieval West Africa possessed a sophisticated intellectual tradition long before European colonization. Musa Musa also strengthened Mali's administrative institutions. He appointed governors, collected taxes, protected trade routes, maintained diplomatic relationships, supported judges and religious leaders. His government helped create political stability across one of Africa's largest empires. The emperor's influence extended well beyond economics. He reshaped architecture by introducing new construction techniques learned during his travels. Mosques built under his patronage blended West African traditions with North African Islamic design. Some of these structures continue standing centuries later. Historians continue debating exactly how wealthy Musa Musa would be in today's money. Some estimates have suggested figures exceeding $400 billion. Others argue that any modern calculation is misleading because medieval empires cannot be directly compared with contemporary financial systems. Unlike modern billionaires, Musa Musa did not simply own businesses. He ruled an empire whose economy, natural resources, taxation, trade routes, agricultural production, and mineral wealth all contributed to his power. His wealth was inseparable from the state itself. For this reason, many historians avoid assigning a precise number. Instead, they conclude that his fortune exceeded any meaningful modern comparison. The story of Mansa Musa also challenges long-standing misconceptions about African history. For centuries, many Western textbooks devoted little attention to the powerful civilizations that flourished across Africa before European colonization. Yet Mali demonstrates that medieval Africa contained organized governments, international diplomacy, advanced scholarship, architectural achievement, sophisticated commerce, and extraordinary economic strength. Its influence reached Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Mansa Musa's reign reminds us that history's greatest empires were not confined to Europe or Asia. Africa produced rulers whose achievements transformed global commerce and intellectual life. His legacy extends beyond wealth. He demonstrated that prosperity could finance education, knowledge, architecture, faith, diplomacy, infrastructure, and cultural advancement. More than 700 years after his reign, historians continue studying his empire because it offers lessons about leadership, economic development, and the responsible use of national wealth. His story remains one of the greatest examples of how natural resources, strategic geography, visionary leadership, and investment in human knowledge can elevate a civilization. The world remembers Mansa Musa because he possessed unimaginable riches. History remembers him because he used those riches to build something that outlived him. Empires rise, empires fall, fortunes disappear, but the institutions of learning, culture, and civilization that Mansa Musa helped create continue to inspire historians, economists, and scholars around the world. His wealth made headlines in the 14th century. His legacy continues shaping history in the 21st. In many societies, 19th century ideas of masculinity encouraged men to present themselves as strong, self-controlled, and capable of defending their bodies. To admit victimization could expose a survivor to ridicule or disbelief. For formerly enslaved black men, the danger was intensified by racism. White culture had already created degrading stereotypes about black male sexuality. A survivor describing assault risked having his experience distorted through those stereotypes. He might also have lacked a private interview setting. Family members could be present. The interviewer might be a stranger. The interviewer might be white. The survivor may have decided that silence was safer. Doddington notes that Foster remains attentive to the silences and concealments in surviving material, while insisting that the archive can still be read for evidence of exploitation. What buck-breaking claims? The modern phrase buck-breaking is commonly used to describe the alleged rape of enslaved black men, often publicly, for the purpose of destroying resistance and intimidating other enslaved people. Some versions of the story present it as a standardized plantation ritual. They describe a defiant black man being selected, assaulted before his family or community, and then returned as an example of the enslaver's absolute power. The underlying idea is historically plausible in one important sense. Slavery did use sexualized violence, public humiliation, torture, forced nudity, and bodily domination to control enslaved people. Sexual assault against enslaved men is supported by historical scholarship. However, the surviving evidence does not clearly establish that buck-breaking was the universally recognized name of a formal, standardized practice operating in the same way across American plantations. That distinction matters. It is accurate to say that enslaved men were sexually violated. It is accurate to say that some were assaulted by white men and white women. It is accurate to say that enslavers controlled male reproduction and used forced exposure and humiliation. It is accurate to say that sexual domination could reinforce racial power. It is not responsible to present every modern description of buck-breaking as though it appears word for word in federal records or plantation manuals. History is powerful enough without invented certainty. Was there proof of enslavers raping men? The answer depends on how narrowly the word proof is defined. There is documentary evidence and scholarly analysis supporting the conclusion that enslaved men experienced sexual assault by people who held power over them. There is also evidence of coerced sexual unions, forced reproduction, intimate inspection, compulsory nudity, sexualized punishment, and psychological sexual humiliation. The University of Georgia Press states directly that a careful reading of surviving sources reveals that sexual assault of enslaved men occurred in systematic and varied forms. It also states that Foster's research documents violations by both white men and white women. That is not an internet rumor. It is the published conclusion of a historian examining newspapers, court records, journals, abolitionist writing, autobiographies, government interviews, and visual materials. But the archive does not give historians a complete count. It cannot tell us precisely how many enslaved men were raped. It does not identify every perpetrator. It does not prove that the same practice occurred on every plantation. It does not justify treating every unverified online story as established fact. The honest historical conclusion is therefore neither denial nor exaggeration. Sexual violence against enslaved men was real. Its full scale is unknown. Its surviving record is fragmented because the people who controlled the law and the archive were often the same people who benefited from slavery. Sexual violence as economic control. The sexual exploitation of enslaved men cannot be separated from the economics of slavery. Enslavers valued bodies according to productivity. A strong young man could command a high price. His labor could produce crops, construct buildings, operate machinery, tend animals, or perform skilled work. His children, if born to enslaved women, could increase another enslaver's property. Control over sexuality, therefore, served economic goals. Enslavers could interfere with marriage. They could separate spouses through sale. They could deny a man access to his wife. They could place him with a woman for reproductive purposes. They could sell his children. They could punish him for forming relationships they disapproved of. The man's emotional life was subordinated to property management. This was sexual exploitation even when the surviving ledger described only births, sales, or labor assignments. Sexual violence as psychological control. Sexual violation also communicated a political message. The enslaver claimed authority over the most private parts of a person's existence. A man could not reliably protect his spouse. He could not legally guarantee that his children would remain with him. He could not prevent his own sale. He could not control who touched or inspected his body. He could not appeal to a legal system that recognized him as equal to the person abusing him. This assault on manhood was deliberate in its effects, whether or not every perpetrator wrote down a formal strategy. Slavery denied enslaved men many of the social roles that free society associated with masculinity: legal independence, household authority, bodily protection, economic autonomy, and recognized fatherhood. Enslaved men nevertheless created families, protected loved ones, resisted exploitation, escaped, learned, worked, worshipped, and built communities. Their inability to defeat every act of violence was not evidence of weakness. It was evidence of the overwhelming power used against them. The violence did not erase resistance. Enslaved men did not simply accept these violations. They resisted in ways that were open and hidden. Some escaped. Some fought overseers. Some protected relatives. Some maintained marriages across plantations. Some visited family members without permission. Some sabotaged work. Some preserved privacy wherever possible. Some refused reproductive arrangements despite the danger. Others survived by appearing compliant while protecting their inner identity from the enslaver's control. Resistance must not be measured only by successful rebellion. Under slavery, preserving love, family, dignity, faith, memory, and self-respect could itself become resistance. Why this history was neglected? Several forces kept this subject outside mainstream history. First, historians initially focused heavily on enslaved men as laborers and rebels, rather than as people vulnerable to sexual violence. Second, scholarship on slavery's sexual abuse correctly exposed the enormous victimization of women, but sometimes treated male victimization as impossible or insignificant. Third, social assumptions often define rape as something only men do to women. Fifth, public discussions of black male sexuality have long been distorted by racist stereotypes. Recognizing enslaved men as sexual victims requires rejecting the false idea that men are always willing participants or that physical strength eliminates vulnerability. It also requires understanding that sexual violence is fundamentally about power. What the American documents actually establish. The United States government's WPA collection establishes that thousands of formerly enslaved Americans gave first-hand testimony about the institution under which they lived. It includes accounts of violence, family control, forced labor, sale, punishment, and intimate interference. Rose Williams's account provides evidence of a coerced reproductive arrangement involving Rufus. Court records reveal how enslaved men's sexuality could become subject to white legal authority. Enslavers' journals and plantation records reveal the management of bodies, births, relationships, labor, and sale. Abolitionist sources exposed forced nudity, whipping, sexual abuse, and bodily degradation. Autobiographies recorded the vulnerability created by enslavement. Modern historical scholarship brings these scattered pieces together and concludes that enslaved men experienced sexual assault and exploitation in varied forms. The documents do not provide a complete history. They provide fragments. But those fragments are enough to reject the claim that enslaved men were untouched by sexual violence. The truth without exaggeration. The truth is not that historians have found a national plantation handbook titled Buck Breaking that instructed every enslaver to rape black men. No such comprehensive proof has been established. The truth is that American chattel slavery gave enslavers nearly total control over black bodies. Within that system, enslaved men were sexually assaulted, coerced